We're live on Facebook. I'm not sure where the others are. Hopefully they're going to be coming along. How are you doing, Angela? Or Angelica?
Angelica.
Angelica. Did you have do they call you like, is there a nickname that they call you at all, or?
Angel.
Angel. Angel.
Angel.
Angel.
Angel. Okay, I'm fine. Okay. Tranquilo.
Yeah. How's the weather in Brazil? Sao Paulo, beautiful. Looks like it's sunny out there, and
it's not so much sun, but it's not cold. It's 24.
Oh, okay.
25. Yeah.
Yeah. We're a little cool. We've dipped down to a little cool again. It's not freezing or anything, but when we go out, we have to wear a coat. I'm not sure where other people are. Unfortunately, when I do all of this stuff, just trying to check to make sure it all shows up on, people see my screen on Facebook. So for those of you who are watching my screen on Facebook, my apologies. I'm just checking. Okay. Not sure where other people are. If there's it may just be you and me. Hopefully it isn't. Brian last week asked a question about the nature of the sun in these teachings, and it was what I was going to focus on today, and I will focus on it today. But we'll see. It's only 10:31. Do you have any questions, Angelica?
No, last time I wrote you about the moon influence. Yes.
Yeah.
And I had one day. It was a dense.
Yeah.
And all day was not easy. It was hard to cross all situations I faced. And in the end of the day, in the night, I perceived the moonlight very strong, and I was thinking about this influence, how the only way possible to try to escape a little bit of this dense influence is working to be in presence with myself.
Yeah. Mr. Gurdjieff said that whenever we're mechanical, the moon is beneath that. The moon plays a role in our mechanical nature. I kind of visualize it like a pendulum. The moon is the heavy part that, causes a certain fluctuation. But as we raise the level of our being, as we raise the level of energy that we transform, we actually break free from the moon. So most people on this planet are, they're subject to the influence of the moon. They're living very mechanical, very machine-like, very sleep-like state. And the moon plays an influence in their lives. But as we begin to grow our being, as we begin to evolve, the moon plays less and less a role. Brian, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Sorry I'm late. I had to restart the computer.
Yeah, my computer was messing up right at the last minute, and it's like, what's going on? And I had to do the Control-Alt-Delete and just try and shut things down and figure it out. I'm thinking I don't have time to reboot. It looks like how's the weather in Scottsdale, Arizona?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay. Karen, how are you this morning?
I'm okay. I'm here.
How are things in Mexico?
Everything's great except that during this time of the year, there are all these fiestas and they set off fireworks starting at 5 a.m. So I've been up for a while.
Starting at 5 a.m.?
Yeah, the custom is start before dawn and set off these fireworks very loudly, and they seem to have been right outside our bedroom. So it wasn't a great start to the day, but it's common for this time of year.
What is the festival, or is it just this time of year? They get up on Sunday morning?
This time of year, all the neighborhoods have these things that are kind of like the cruise in New Orleans, where the neighbors all get together and build floats and costumes and everything, and then they do a local presentation, if you want to call it that. Like, they dance to music and parade around in their costumes, and then as each neighborhood does theirs, finally they all do it together on a day in June, which is the loudest, most horrendous imagining you can fathom of.
Okay.
Thousands of people all dressed up, mostly getting drunk, having fun in the street.
At 5 a.m.
No, this starts, the main thing starts later, but the fireworks are in the dawn.
Okay. I'm just going to pull up my new favorite quote, just to recognize the reason that we engage in this work. This is a very, very earth-centric spirituality. Within Buddhism, the goal is nirvana. It can almost be translated as blowing out the flame or blowing out the candle. Within Buddhism, nirvana is the extinction of the self. The highest goal in Buddhism is to be liberated from this world, to be liberated from the universe, just to enter into that state of nirvana, which, as I said, is a state of self-extinction. Within Hinduism, they talk about moksha, which is liberation, and moksha is liberation from this world. So again, it's a desire to break free from the wheel of samsara, to break free from this world. So the ultimate aim in certain philosophies is to escape existence. It's to break free from existence. And so their focus is on liberation, moksha, nirvana. Whereas these teachings, we seek transformation within the world. So we seek to help this planet. We recognize that we are part of a ray of creation, that there are levels of being. And as we raise the level of our being by transforming higher energies, we serve a higher purpose. So that's one of the things that I really like about this teaching, is it's really earth-centric. It's not to flee the earth, it's not to get away from existence, it's to transform as high an energy as possible in order to be of as great a service as possible. So, this came from Roger Lipsy's Gurdjieff Reconsidered, and the original was in French. I think it was Henri Tracol who recorded this, wrote it down in his notebook. Mr. Gurdjieff told him this in French: I wish to be, I can be, I have the right to be, I have the ability to be. I swear to myself that this will never be for my personal profit, but to help others. I wish to be, to help others. This is to be understood as a vow. So, this is actually a corrective, because there have been talks of we shouldn't share these teachings, we should keep inner work hidden away. There's the potential for abuse. And there is a minor potential for abuse. Someone who doesn't work on conscience, someone who doesn't work on themselves in the proper way can do certain inner exercises and gain a sort of an influencing effect over other people. Not a huge major one, but a big enough one that they can begin to lead people astray. However, people have been studying hypnosis, NLP, ways of manipulation, ways of persuasion I believe it was Sigmund Freud's cousin who, started the whole advertising industry, basically, that we understand it as now, as subtle persuasion in an attempt to bypass the critical factor of the conscious mind and really influence people in nefarious ways. And politicians have picked up on this. There are whole academics, who have devoted their entire lives to the study of influencing people. So I think at this point, the desire, the need, the want to hide these teachings away, to hide the inner work away, has long since passed. But this is a corrective. If you say this and you mean this as a vow, this will help keep you aligned. It will help you realize that we are not doing this for ourselves. That's egocentric. That's personal as opposed to impersonal. That's subjective as opposed to objective. We want to live a more impersonal, objective life, and these teachings will help us to achieve that. So, this is just I like it because it's a corrective mechanism. If we say it, and we say it, and we repeat it as a vow, it will be locked into our subconscious mind that we are here to serve this planet, that we are here to serve our fellow human beings. And we are also here to serve ourselves. So to me, these are the 3 lines of work: for myself, for my fellow human being, and for the planet itself. Okay, Hitcham. I don't even know where that is coming from, because okay, and Ian is supposed to be here, except we can't see Ian. So inner work. Mr. Gurdjieff said it's always good to begin with an affirmation, and in a sense, we've just begun with an affirmation. A good affirmation to repeat is, I do this work for myself. I do this work for my fellow human beings. And I do this work for this holy planet, for Mother Earth. That everything we do has those 3 lines connected with it. And so let's just begin by focusing on our breath, focusing on our breathing. So become aware of the air as it flows in through your nostrils. Perhaps become aware as it flows in through your nostrils, back of mouth, throat, down past your vocal cords into your lungs and back out again. Become aware of the sensation of air as it flows in and out. Become aware of the movement of the various muscles in the body as you breathe. The primary muscle is the diaphragm. It controls the various other muscles, like the muscles between the ribs and the muscles in the abdomen. So become aware of the various muscles in your body that are involved in breathing. And then become aware of your body. Try to sense your body however you can, in whatever way you can. Try to become aware of your physical self. Perhaps notice the effect of gravity on your body. Become aware of gravity. Become aware of the sensation of those pressure points underneath perhaps your feet, your legs, your sitting bones, where gravity is pulling you down into contact with the surface beneath you. Perhaps become aware of the temperature of the air that is surrounding you. Try to become aware of the internal temperature in your body, perhaps in your forehead, where we are taught as children to become aware of our temperature. Try to become aware of the sense of balance. Notice how your skull, that heavy object, is balanced on your neck, which is balanced on your shoulders, which is balanced on your spinal column, which is balanced on your pelvic bones. Try to become aware of the atmospheric pressure around you You know, if it's raining outside, the atmospheric pressure will be lower. If it's sunny and beautiful, it will be higher. If you live down towards, you know, sea level, it will be lower. If you live up in the mountains, it will be higher. We actually have a specific sensory nerve nodes in our brain that are devoted to the detection of the atmosphere around us. So try to sense your body as fully as you can. Try to sense your body from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head. Try to become aware of the sensation of self. Try to become aware of the touch of clothing on your body, the air that touches your face. Try to become aware of the hair on your head, any jewelry you may have. Even try to become aware of various internal sensations. Probably the biggest internal sensation that we are generally aware of is our stomach, followed by our bladder, followed by our colon. Try to become aware of the inside of your body, sensing the inside of your body. And then we're going to briefly do Mr. Gurdjieff's filling exercises. So just allow your attention to rest. And as a vessel fills with warm golden honey, so too can we fill slowly and methodically our body with sensation. And I recall, this is going back 12, 13 years, when I was actually first taught this particular exercise. I wasn't able to distinguish. I wasn't able to be aware of myself filling. But 10 years later, I was surprised at the persistence and how easy it became to really isolate parts of my body as I'm slowly filling with sensation. So this is something that as we practice it more, we become more proficient at it. So let's just begin by becoming aware of the bottom of our feet. Try to sense the bottom, those pads on your toes, the balls of your feet. Try to sense the instep, the bottom of your heels. And then imagine as if your feet were slowly being filled with the warm golden honey. Perhaps, you know, the temperature of our body, 97 or 98.7. Whatever it is in Fahrenheit, I forget now. Try to sense your feet filling with sensation. And then slowly allow this sensation to move up from the bottom of your feet, up through your feet to your ankles. And sense this sensation growing and rising up through your lower legs, up to your knees, through your upper legs, up to your hips. And then become aware of it going from the bottom of your feet up to your hips and your hands. And then slowly rising up from your hips, from your hands, into your lower torso, lower arms, into the middle of your torso, your midriff, middle back, elbows, up to your chest, upper back, upper arms, and filling with sensation all the way to your shoulders. Try to sense your whole body from the bottom of your feet to your shoulders. And then allow it to fill up through your neck, then up through your head to the top of your head. And try to sense your entire body as one organic whole, from the bottom of your feet all the way up to the top of your head. And then I would like you to focus on your right arm. And I would like you to become aware of the flesh in your right arm. So the muscles, the ligaments, the fleshy part of your right arm. So the flesh of your right bicep, lower arm, the flesh in your hands and fingers. And then move down to your right leg. And again, simply try to sense the flesh in your right leg. Perhaps moving down your right leg, sensing the flesh. And then moving over to your left leg. And let's move up from the bottom of your left foot, up your left leg, sensing the flesh in your left leg. And then sense the flesh in your left arm, moving up from your fingers all the way up to the top of your left arm. Trying to sense the flesh in your arms. And then let's move over to our torso, the very base of our torso. Try to sense the flesh in your buttocks, your pelvis. Let's move up the flesh in your lower torso, the lumbar region in your lower back, your lower abdomen, moving up to your middle back, your midriff, your solar plexus, sensing the flesh as you move into your upper back and chest, sensing the flesh in your neck, sensing the flesh in your head. Try to sense the flesh in your whole torso, and then try to sense the flesh in your whole body. Become aware of your flesh self. And St. Paul talked about soma, psyche, and pneuma. Soma is the fleshly self. It's the carnal self, the meat self. Carnal means meat. It's the meat self. He also talked about psyche, which in the Old Testament, the word is ruach, which is better translated as the bone self. So let's bring our awareness back to our right arm and become aware of the bones. So become aware of the bone in your bicep, the bones in your elbows, moving down to the two bones in your lower right arm, down into the bones in your hands, in your palms, in your fingers. And then let's move to the bones in the right leg. So become aware of your thigh bone, moving down to your knees, then down to the two bones in your lower right leg, and then your ankles, and then moving down into the bones in your feet, the bones in the center of your feet, the soles of your feet, to your toes. And then let's move over to your left foot and become aware of the bones in your left foot, your left toes, the bones and the soles of your feet, within your feet, then moving up to the bones in your left ankle, the two bones in your left lower leg, your knees, the bone, your thigh bone. And then let's move up to your left arm and become aware of the bones in your left hand and fingers, and your left wrist, the two bones in your left lower arm, your left elbow, the bones in your upper arm. And then let's move down to the pelvic bones, the hip bones. Move down to the sacral bones in the spine, the spinal column below the pelvic bones. And then let's move up the spine, slowly moving your awareness up the spine and the bones composing our spine. And then become aware of your shoulder blades, those flat bones, large flat bones in your shoulders. And then become aware of your rib cage, the bones that are connected to the upper part of your spinal column. Become aware of your rib cage connecting to your breastbone, and become aware of your breastbone, and then become aware of your collarbones. And then move up into the cervical vertebrae, the bones in your neck, and then become aware of your jawbone. Then become aware of your facial bones, that is the bones in your face where your upper teeth are connected to. Then become aware of the nasal bone at the top of your mouth, in the roof of your mouth. And then become aware of your eye sockets, the sphenoid bones. Sphenoid means wing-shaped, because your eye sockets are wing-shaped bones. And then become aware of the temporal bones, just on the left of your skull, above your ears. And become aware of the frontal bone, just, in front on your forehead, and the parietal bone on top of your head, and then the occipital bone in the very back of your head. Become aware of your bone self, your vertebral self. And the vertebral self is a very important dimension of these teachings. The development of bones, of a central nervous system, of a spinal column, indicated a very specific phase in the evolution of the life on this planet. So the bone self, try to become aware of all of your bones at the same time. The word that was used in the Old Testament was ruach, and the correspondence in the New Testament with St. Paul is actually psyche, which we mistranslate. It's better thought of as connected with our bones. This is the self also in World 24. The state of personal consciousness is connected to the bones. And then I would like you to return your attention to your right arm and do your best to become aware of the marrow in your right arm. And this, in ancient times was called the marrow self. And the marrow self is the self in World 12, which, as I will talk about later, is at the level of the sun. Now, we have two different kinds of marrow in our body. We have yellow marrow and red marrow. The yellow marrow creates white blood cells, and the red marrow creates red blood cells. The yellow marrow is generally created in the long bones. So I would like you to become aware of your long bones. Let's start with the right arm, the long bones in the upper arm and the lower arm. And try as best you can to sense the yellow marrow in your arms. And this corresponds with pneuma, spirit, with St. Paul, and in the Old Testament, the word neshama. It's what comes from above. The marrow self is really also the metaphor or connected with the solar self, which I will talk about again later in today's meeting. So become aware of the yellow marrow in your right upper arm, the yellow marrow in your right lower arm, the yellow marrow in your right upper leg, your thigh bone, the yellow marrow in your right lower leg, and then moving over to the other side of the body, become aware of the yellow marrow in your left lower leg, the yellow marrow in your left upper leg, the yellow marrow in your left lower arm, the yellow marrow in your left upper arm, and try to become aware of the yellow marrow in all of your limbs, your right arm, right leg, left arm. And then let's move to the red marrow. Try to become aware of the red marrow in your pelvic bones, the red marrow in your sacral bones, the part of your spine below your pelvis. And then let's move up. The red marrow in the lumbar region of your spine, that's the lower back. The red marrow in the thoracic region of your spine, so your middle to upper back. Try to become aware of the red marrow in your shoulder blades, the red marrow in your rib cage, the red marrow in your breastbone, the red marrow in your collarbone. And then moving up your cervical vertebrae, the red marrow in your neck bones. And then try to become aware of the red marrow in your jawbone, your facial bones, the red marrow in the nasal bone at the top of your mouth, the roof of your mouth, the red marrow in your eye sockets, the red marrow in your temple bones at the sides of your head, the red marrow in your frontal bone in your forehead, the red marrow on the parietal bone at the top of your head, And finally, the red marrow in the occipital bone at the back of your head. Try to sense, try to become aware of the red marrow from your pelvic bones, your sacrum, spine, up through your spine, your shoulder blades, rib cage, breastbone, collarbone, your cervical vertebrae, and the various bones within your head. Try to sense your marrow self, yourself in world 12. Try to sense this dimension of your being and recognize that calling it the flesh self, the bone self, and the marrow self. This goes back, to ancient traditions, and it's even found, as I said, within the Bible, within those correspondences. The equivalent of the flesh, and become aware of the flesh of your body. The word in the Old Testament is nephesh. And then become aware of your bones. The word in the Old Testament was ruach. And then become aware of your marrow. And the word in the Old Testament was neshama. Now, these words in the Old Testament have also been used and translated as soul. And that's why, so sometimes they'll use the word in English, soul, for all three words, but it really should be the flesh soul to distinguish nefesh from the other levels, and ruach, the bone soul, and neshama, the marrow soul. And within the New Testament, St. Paul, the equivalents are soma, the body, psyche, the bones, and pneuma, the marrow, even though in the Greek it's been translated as body, mind, and soul. I don't quite agree with those translations. But understand that when St. Paul was talking about those three levels, he was talking about the self as it exists in world 48, the carnal self. And he was also talking about the self that exists in world 24. That's the level of personal consciousness. This is the psyche. And then he was also talking about the self that exists in world 12, the spiritual self, pneuma. If you read tales, you will notice when Mr. Gurdjieff uses the word organic, he is always referring to the self in world 48. When he uses the word psychic, he's referring to the self in world 24. And when he uses the word willful, he's referring to the self in world 12. So you will see and come across passages where he talks about organic, psychic, and willful in the same sentence. And he's differentiating these different levels within us. So become aware of the flesh in your body. Try to become aware of all of the flesh and only the flesh in your body. Try to become aware of your flesh self. And then moving a little deeper, try to become aware of your bone self. Try to sense the bones in your body. And then let's move inwards a little bit more and try to become aware of your marrow self. Try to become aware of the marrow in your body. And sense all of these. Now, one of the things that Mr. Gurdjieff said is when he was asked towards the end of his life, what was one of the most interesting things he noticed? And it was the growth in sensation. So this sensory awareness of our physical body, of the flesh, moving deeper in the bones, moving deeper into the marrow. And perhaps next week I will do a different exercise where we use sensation and we expand it out to the reaches of the universe. Sensation can always grow. There's always the possibility to grow the awareness of our sensation. So become aware of your body, become aware of the flesh, become aware of the bones, become aware of the marrow in whatever way you can, bringing this awareness to these different levels, these different inner realities of your being. And then just allow your attention to rest. And we will finish with the collected state exercise. So as the earth is surrounded by an atmosphere, so too are we surrounded by an atmosphere. Most of the time our atmosphere is dispersed. It's drawn this way and that way. Our thoughts, take it one way, our emotions, our sensations. Collect it, draw it into yourself. Bring your atmosphere so it surrounds you, perhaps a meter, meter and a half. Surround yourself by your atmosphere. Become aware of the boundary of your atmosphere. Keep your atmosphere still. Keep it calm. Keep it tranquil. And in a moment, I'm going to count from 1 up to 3. And when I get to 3, breathe your atmosphere in. And then when you breathe out, imagine something of it remains within you. 1, 2, 3. Breathe your atmosphere in, and as you breathe out, imagine something remains within you to coat yourself on the inner level, to coat your inner being, to help form what Mr. Gurdjieff called your Kesdjan body. And then let's just finish, silently repeat in your mind the affirmation, may results from this exercise be transubstantiated within me. For my being. And then just come back into this present moment. Ian, can you hear us, Ian? Are you there? Or, Ian is showing on the screen.
Yes, I'm here. I've been muted.
We can't see you.
Yeah, I got on a little late. I didn't want my video.
Okay.
The situation's a little different today. There's not much to see. Please continue.
Okay, that's okay. I'm just saying that. Hisham, how did you get into this meeting?
Well, I invited myself. I was looking your video on Facebook, and I got the IP, and then I joined through Zoom.
Okay, because normally in order to attend these meetings, you have to talk to me first.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, these meetings are exclusive invitation. I didn't know that someone could figure out the back route and suddenly attend these meetings. How do we pronounce your name? Hisham?
Yes, that is correct.
Where do you live?
I live in Morocco.
Morocco, okay. How long have you been interested in the Gurdjieff teachings?
Now it's been 4 or 5 years.
Oh, okay. I'll have to talk to you privately at some point, maybe in this week, just so I can get to know you a bit more and understand where you're coming from. I don't want to interview you, when we're live on Facebook and with all these other people. Last week, Brian asked a question, and it was about the sun. And I don't know if he did or didn't realize what a can of worms he was opening up in terms of asking, where does the sun fit into these teachings? And I spent a bit of yesterday and some of this morning. I've got to bring it up as a picture or something. I won't be able to show it. So those of you on Facebook, I apologize for showing you my screen. And but here I will pull up this diagram. Let me see if I can make it wider. This is a familiar diagram in part, but where does the sun, the sun in the sky fit into these teachings? It's an immense question. On the very, very right-hand side, let me see if I can, I don't know what the spotlight is, but this here, on the right-hand side, this is our particular ray of creation. So the ray of creation starts with the absolute. Then from the absolute comes all worlds. From all worlds come all suns. From all suns comes our sun. From our sun, then the planetary realm. I didn't have the space in there to write planetary realm, so I put our planets. Then the earth, and then the moon. This is our particular ray of creation. So this is the involution of our particular universe. Starting with the absolute, it's like the Big Bang as the universe gets denser and denser and more physical and heavier as it moves out. And within our particular ray of creation, it ends with our moon. Now, another universe, another solar system, it would be a different ray of creation. We can only speak of our own particular ray of creation. Now, I've got it here in yellow, just to show the correspondences. So if we follow along through the yellow, which is the sun is the equivalent of hydrogen 12. So when I speak of world 12, I'm speaking of the solar realm. We move across to this, whoops, I didn't quite circle it properly, to this middle one. We will realize that, between the three levels of man, mechanical man, man in world 48, mindful man in world 24, the man that exists at the solar level, the solar man is the awakened man who is centered in world 12. And we can also move over, and these words here on the left, these come from the diagram of all living things. So this is the actual evolution of life on planet Earth, starting with the metals, moving up to the minerals, up to the plants, up to the invertebrates, the vertebrates, which the vertebral self that we talked about, up to, except the vertebrates are 48, the awareness of that vertebral self is 24. I will confuse you if I explain that a little bit too much. Up through man, angels, archangels, the unchanging, the absolute. Over here, we can look at world 48, mechanical man, whoops, I circled mindful man, world 24, mindful man, world 12, awake man. Let me just get rid of all of those. So we can see the three levels of man located here. So to exist centered at the solar level is to be awake. So the sun is both a reality, it's there in the heavens, but we have the potential through the growth of our inner beings. First, there's our physical body, then we grow our Kesdjan body, and then we grow our higher being body. The Kesdjan body is the growth within us in world 24 at the level of personal consciousness, and the higher being body is a subsequent growth that occurs within us at an even higher level, and it is on par with the solar realm. When we are mindful, to become aware of our body right now, to sense our breathing, to become aware of the touch of clothing on our skin. The sensation of self is an element of personal consciousness. It's a World 24 phenomenon. But within this awareness, one of the fuels for this awareness is that higher level. So the higher blends with the lower to meet in the middle. So this whole growth in our being is an alchemical growth. It's a growth of ourselves at the higher level. Now, just to sort of bring us around here, I've isolated the octave of food. And I've put in the places where Mr. Gurdjieff in Beelzebub Tales, these mouth, stomach, duodenum, this comes from Beelzebub Tales. So Mr. Gurdjieff told us that these are the places, the transformational points within our body. So food enters us, and within our mouth, it meets with our saliva, which is the higher carbon, and our teeth. And it comes in at hydrogen 768 as we can see here, right at the bottom. And then it moves into our stomach, where it meets with the gastric juices and is transformed into chyme, which is at the level of hydrogen 384. Then it moves into our duodenum, the part just immediately below our stomach, hydrogen 192. And this is the me. And without an outside shock, there would be no further development. But Mr. Gurdjieff said nature has given us the first mechanical shock, which is actually the octave of air. If you just look up to this diagram here, this dough here is the outside shock that gives the me the potential to evolve further, so that the me then moves up to fa, and the transformation occurs in the liver. And again, as I spoke last week in terms of the moon is world 96, and so we can see the correspondence with the moon and the liver. Then we move up to the cerebral hemispheres of our brain. Then we move up to the cerebellum. And it's interesting, the cerebellum is world 24. World 24 in terms of the octave of food is the ability to sense ourselves, the sensation of self. If you can sense your body from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, if you can sense the touch of clothing, the air that touches your face, if you can sense gravity, balance, your stomach, these are all world 24 phenomenon. And scientists doing current research on the cerebellum have identified it as the place where we become aware of our physical self in space. There's a really interesting connection between the cerebellum and the ability to be physically aware of myself. And according to these teachings, this is where this energy, this molecule is transformed within us. Now, the only octave that naturally proceeds fully is the octave of food. And the solar realm of the octave of food, the realm of hydrogen 12, is found within our testes if we're men and ovaries if we are women. So the solar self is found, or the solar energy is transformed within our reproductive organs for the octave of food, for the physical self. Now I'm going to point out something here in terms of the octave of food. Mr. Gurdjieff said the octave of food is the only fully developed octave within us. The octave of air actually has trouble extending beyond the me that I'm circling. So most people, even though they can touch and become aware of Fa 24 of the octave of air, it's just like how most people can become a little mindful. You tell them to become mindful, become aware of their hands and fingers, and they can. And so we have an ability to have a tiny little bit of access to that. But usually the emotions, because they don't get the sufficient energy required to move, they begin to evolve downwards, into the realm of World 96 and potentially moving parts of our being downwards. So let me just get rid of that. So the octave of food is the only octave within ourselves that completes itself, so to speak. It goes up to the C, the next level where we need an outside agency. So we can see here that in the top left diagram that C12 is the highest energy that the human body naturally produces. Now, what this means as well is that this energy here, Law 12, is also lawfully produced in our body. And I've talked about other reasons why all inner work needs to begin with the sensation of self. I've talked about how we have to learn how to sense our body so well we can hold it with intent in the back of our awareness as we begin to become, to perceive, what we see, hear, smell, taste, as we begin to bring the head brain online in World 24 and mindfully look, listen, smell, and taste. We need to have developed the sensation of self so well it sits in the back of our awareness with intent. So our head brain becomes like the positive diode and our body brain becomes like the negative diode. But in order to do that, we have to develop the sensation of self. We have to work on developing this awareness of our body, excuse me, as best as we can. Fortunately, in terms of the octave of food, this ability is the easiest. It's easier for anyone on this planet to become mindful of some kind of sensation within their body than it is, for instance, for them to become mindful of what they can see, hear, smell, or taste. That requires another transformational process. So we are born with the physical body fully intact. And so this means that the sensation of self, this awareness of our physical self, is the easiest thing to practice. Fortunately, it's also the thing we should practice when we are new to these teachings, bringing our awareness back to ourself. Because with the octave of food, this is fully developed. Now, I'm going to just kind of step back slightly. I did a number of programs on meetings with the correspondence, between psychology and cosmology. You cannot study psychology without studying cosmology. And you cannot study cosmology without studying psychology. Man is a microcosm of the macrocosm. What is here is everywhere. What is not here is nowhere. As above, so below. So when we study psychology, when we study the places where we get broken, when we study the 7 different ways that we leak energy, the 7 different aspects of sleep, when we study the mindful state, the state of personal consciousness, when we study the awakened state, when we study human psychology, we can't fully understand this unless we also understand and study cosmology. So within this diagram is both the study of psychology and the study of cosmology. There's a phrase that has been attributed to Socrates and ancient Greeks, know thyself. That's not the proper phrase. The phrase is much more ancient, and it is know thyself, and thou shalt know the gods and the universe. And this is not really a phrase, it's actually a formula. The know thyself is the study of psychology. And the gods and the universe is the study of cosmology. So we could also flip the phrase around and say, know the gods and the universe, and you will know yourself. That there's a correspondence. So these numbers, 1, 3, 6, 12, all the way down, are cosmological. They are also psychological. So we can look up at the sun in the sky and say, what within me corresponds to the sun? Well, our reproductive organs for a normal person. Now keep in mind that the diagram on the left, this represents an idealized normal person, because things degenerate, emotions can go down, thoughts can go down. So, you know, if it doesn't go up, it goes down. So this over here can go down. This can go down, you know, the impressions that come in. So what is depicted on there is really an idealized representation of the movement up. This diagram can get far more complex. And this brings us to the real question. Unless these solar carbons, and I'll explain it, so I'm just going to read here, unless these solar carbons have already been accumulated within us, no transformation is possible. So the only question we should really ask is, how do we accumulate these 3 molecules? This molecule on the left, somehow we have it within us. It's connected to the C12, it's connected to our reproductive organs. The higher blends with the lower to meet in the middle. So C12, something from the octave of food, has to meet with So 48 in order to meet in the middle as Law 24. And let me go over to the left here, Law 24 that I'm circling in red. This is the molecule involved in self-sensing. To sense your hands, to be aware of the backs of your hands, the palms of your hands, to be aware of your fingers, to be aware of your hands as fully as you can. You can taste in this sensation of your hands, you can taste hydrogen 24. The sensation of your hands is the manifestation of hydrogen 24. Something higher blended with something lower to meet in the sensation of your hands. Now I would like you to just focus on your hands. Try to focus on your hands as fully as you can. And as you're doing this, and a moment ago while you were doing this, your feet were actually transforming hydrogen 48. Your feet were in a very mechanical state. Now that you've become aware of your feet have moved up a whole order, and that sensation of your feet is a result of this transformation. It is fueled by the law 24 over on the left. And so we can do this normally. Somehow, this first red circle, we have the necessary carbon, the necessary higher energies within us. And when I use the word carbon, please go to In Search of the Miraculous, chapter 9. It'll confuse you to no end, but I don't want to really take a step to explain what I mean by carbon. It's explained in there. The higher blends with the lower to meet in the middle. So a positive blends with a negative to reach the level of the equalizing. And so we already have that energy within us, that solar energy at the higher level. So to become aware of your hands, even though this is a world 24 phenomenon, this is fueled by hydrogen 24. Within this process, hidden is a solar energy. Without that solar energy that's hidden in this process, you wouldn't sense your hands. Like right now, I can't see my right hand, but it's still here. It's just behind my awareness. So inherent in the sensation of our hands is that higher hydrogen 12. It comes into contact with the mechanical state of our hands, which is the non-awareness, so to speak, of our hands. And together the higher blends with the lower to meet in the middle. And Mr. Gurdjieff said that unless we have the higher carbons within us, no real inner growth is possible. He used the analogy, he said that within the alchemists of the medieval ages, they talked about how you need a little tiny bit of gold to make gold. And he talks about how this is really, what they really meant was that you need a little bit of this higher energy already within you in order to meet with the lower to begin this transformational process. So this brings us to the question of the middle one. And this is the octave of air. This is the octave of emotions. How do we acquire this solar particle? How do we acquire SO 12? The emotion, our emotions on the solar level. How do we acquire a tiny drop of this in order to allow for the emotional alchemical process to continue, in order to grow? And in the middle, I'm circling it, the octave of food. And notice how the octave of food in the middle has grown beyond the octave of food over on the left-hand side with normal man. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we acquire this carbon? And on the Gurdjieff Group of Toronto YouTube channel, I have a number of exercises. The main one is called the morning sitting. Through doing that exercise, the morning sitting, we are actually bringing in these higher carbons necessary for the transformation of our emotions. So it's something that I've tried to talk to people about. And within my live Tuesday evening group, some people can do it and some people can't. And my guess is the reason they can't quite do it is because they haven't sufficiently seeded the higher particles within themselves, and they haven't sufficiently cleansed themselves at the lower level, figured out where they're leaking energy in world 96 through those lucid emotions I talked about last week, figure out where they're leaking energy in world 24 in the mechanical self, And George Adi said that there are 7 aspects of sleep. And as I've always said, I never get them all right, but consider our identification, internal considering, negative emotions, formatory thinking, lying, and I always miss one. And then he talks about how daydreaming and imagination are really part of the same one. So I'm missing one somehow there. I think it's excessive bodily movements. Those are the ways that we can leak energy. So we've got to plug the leaks, but we've also got to breathe in these higher molecules. In that chapter, In a Search of the Miraculous, Mr. Gurdjieff says that, let's just say, a normal person breathes in 20 elements from the air and he exhales. I forget the number that he used. Let's say he exhales 10 of them. So he retains 10 of them within inside himself. Another person breathes in those 20 elements and they retain 15. Rather than breathing out the 10, they breathe out 5. And so through our breath and through focusing on our breath, we can begin to see our body with these solar particles that we need. Let's just try an experiment. Try to just relax your body from the top of your head down to the bottom of your feet. Breathe in to the top of your head, and as you breathe out, relax your body down to the bottom of your feet. Breathing into the top of your head and relaxing your body as you breathe out to the bottom of your feet. Just relaxing your body as deeply and as completely as you can. And then as you breathe in, become aware, become mindful, become conscious of your breathing. J.G. Bennett said, in order to bring these higher molecules that we need for this alchemical process into ourself, we do it through conscious breathing. I think it's a bit more complex than that. I think the process is, I just did something with my screen. Well, I won't bother. The process is a bit more complex with that, but we can begin with conscious breathing. We can begin just by becoming aware of the air that flows in to our body. But it's more complex than this. In the morning sitting, in that exercise I have on the Gurdjieff Group of Toronto YouTube channel, it's this more elaborate exercise contained there within that exercise. And that's why I recommend it as the morning sitting. It's why I've labeled it the morning sitting, because it involves an exercise that allows us to seed ourselves with these higher molecules that are necessary for this development of the octave of air. So just relax your body as completely as you can. All inner work should be predicated on the relaxation of your body. And then become aware of your breathing. Become aware of breathing in and become aware of breathing out. And let's actually just take a step back. Let's begin to sense our hands. Let's begin to sense our fingers. Let's begin to sense our hands and fingers and become aware of the sensation of your hands and fingers. And then again, focus on your breathing. Breathing in consciously breathing out consciously, perhaps even involving the head brain. As you breathe in, imagine breathing in perhaps particles of light, luminosity, the active elements of the air we breathe. As you breathe out, imagine breathing out a gray, foggy waste. And try to become aware of something that almost seems atmospheric. It almost seems to flow down around the outside of your hands and fingers. It's completely qualitatively different than the sensation of your hands and fingers. This is something else. We can become aware of feeding through our breath in our extremities. It's easier to become aware of this in our hands and fingers, and then possibly within our feet and toes. So as you breathe in, become aware. Something's different than sensation. And some of you will be able to get it. You will become aware of that atmospheric-like quality that seems to flow down around the outside of your hands and fingers, even though it's the oxygen and higher molecules in your blood. So it's actually within your bloodstream. But we can perceive it as if it's almost flowing on the outside. And I can only describe it from my own perceptions, and so it's one of the reasons why I call it atmospheric, because it almost seems like an air, like atmospheric, very light, but there's a resonance, there's an energy to it flowing down around your hands and fingers. And if you are able to perceive this, if you are able to become aware of this atmospheric quality, this energy that flows down around your hands and fingers, and it's connected with the pulse of your breath, you can notice that there's a kind of ebb and flow to it in connection with your breath. If you can become aware of this, it means that you have some of these solar carbons. You have some of this molecule right here in the very center. This is required. To have this within you is necessary for you to become aware of this atmospheric quality, to become aware of feeling. Within the teachings, we use the word feeling as opposed to sensing. So you can become aware of the sensation of your hands, or you can become aware of this feeling, this quality of feeling flowing down around your hands. And it's easiest to notice in our extremities. But for instance, within the exercise, the morning sitting, the goal is to become aware of it arising in the solar plexus and then moving down to the reproductive organs. I believe I have another much shorter exercise there, detailing Mr. Gurdjieff's words in terms of breathing. He doesn't talk about the hands and becoming aware of it in the hands. This is something that I know from elsewhere. And so this what we can potentially feel around our hands, this feeling that's different than sensation, is, again, this is a world 24 experience. To become aware of this atmospheric quality, this atmospheric quality is world 24, hydrogen 24, but it needs a little bit of the solar realm. Something higher within us has to be already present in order for us to be able to become aware of this. And so a big part of these teachings is really how to stop leaking energy at the lower level, and through the inner work, especially the inner exercises, how to accumulate the higher energies necessary to grow our being, particularly our Kesdjan body, which is the middle body in this diagram. Now this then brings us to that third circle. Unfortunately, there's not a lot in the literature on the third circle. However, try to become aware of your ear hearing my voice. Try to become aware of your eyes receiving the photons, the lights, the image that comes into them. Try to become aware, mindful, conscious of your nose, becoming aware of the scents around you, perhaps scents in the room, smells in the rooms, or even the scent of your own body, your own smell. And somehow in these perceptions, these are perceptions of personal consciousness. By becoming aware of our ears hearing sounds, by becoming aware of our eyes perceiving visual images, lights, by becoming aware of our nose receiving smells, the taste buds in our mouth receiving taste, we are somehow calling upon this carbon. This is necessary in order for us to develop the awareness of these external impressions. So on the very left, C12 is naturally and already produced within the body, which is why it is easiest for anyone on the planet to become aware and sense their body and develop this mindful awareness of their body. This is kind of given to us through conscious breathing, through some of the exercises that Mr. Gurdjieff gave to his students. Within those exercises is the key to bringing more and more of this solar particle, So 12, the octave of air, for emotions, to develop our emotional self. And then somehow, I haven't noticed yet, there could be within the teachings, perhaps I just haven't discerned them. The interesting thing about these teachings, it's like an onion. You peel a layer and there's another layer. You peel that layer and then there's another layer, and there are always more and more layers. And the longer I've been within these teachings, and it's now 38 years, new stuff appears. So maybe this is hidden somewhere else and I just haven't come across it. However, I do know that to become mindful of what we see, and to be mindful of what we hear, and to be mindful of what we smell, to be mindful of what we taste, requires this higher energy. And then this also brings us back to something I've talked about before. Because if we don't have this energy within us, these higher particles, we can't do the inner work. But, you know, this is not sort of metaphorical. This is real. And, you know, you fill a car, you fill the gas tank, and the car can drive as long as there is gasoline, petrol in the gas tank. You run out of fuel and the car stops. So this is, if you can't do inner work, it's because you don't have a sufficient quantity of these higher carbons within yourself. And if you're doing work and it's wonderful, and then suddenly you fall out of it and you can't do it anymore, it's because you've used them up and you have to accumulate more. Fortunately, one of the major places we do accumulate more is in our sleep. So having a proper sleep and going into the deepest non-REM dream states allows us to accumulate this energy. And also, when we wake up in the morning, doing inner work in the morning, doing some kind of an inner exercise like the morning sitting, first thing, helps us accumulate more of these higher particles so that we can do more inner work throughout the day. So I'm just going to, let me, okay, I don't know how, somehow, oops, I don't know what's going on here. Whoops, I just did something. There, let me stop sharing so that we're all back. So it's kind of a very lengthy, detailed sort of answer to your question from last week, Brian. And let me go, I mean, I'm muted. I think I muted everyone. Mute. We don't have a lot of time left. Any questions, any comments that anyone would like to make on this?
Yeah, you said that you had people that they said they can't do the morning sitting. Does that just mean that like their mind is wandering while they're trying to? What do you mean by they can't?
Well, it wasn't that they can't, I mean, they can't do the feeling part. So the morning sitting begins with the body, brain, and the sensation of self. So the right arm, right leg, left arm, up our spine, our head, down to our reproductive organs, the awareness of the sensation of self. Then we add the head brain. So the imagination of breathing in active elements within the air, perhaps particles of light, and then the breathing out of the great foggy waste. Those are both, imaginal parts of the head brain. And then to become aware of something different than sensation that arises as we breathe, and something arises in our solar plexus, and then as we breathe out, it flows down to our reproductive organs. And it's this something that people aren't able to do. They are able to do most of it, but when it comes to being able to differentiate and distinguish between feeling and sensation, they are not able to distinguish feeling. This is why I try to get people to practice and try to develop this awareness with our hands and fingers. If we can become aware of feeling in our hands and fingers, it's easiest in our extremities. We can then hopefully begin to become aware of it in our solar plexus and then moving down to our reproductive organs. So people can do most of the morning sitting, but they just are unable to become aware of feeling. They're unable to distinguish feeling from sensation, and it's because they haven't grown and brought enough of those molecules within themselves to lead to this awareness. However, if they continue to do the morning exercise, they will strengthen their ability to do it, because they will engage in conscious breathing, and they will slowly start to seed themselves with those solar particles, with SO12 that they need in order to continue this.
Okay.
Yeah, it's come somewhat through theoretical, but chapter 9 of In Search of the Miraculous, first time I read that back in 1981, I said, I'm going to have to hold off on understanding this. And people who are new to the teachings, I recommend reading that, but don't try and understand it. It's so complicated. Back in 2003, I had Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous, his food diagrams. I printed that, put it beside my bed, and it was the last thing I saw before I went to sleep and the first thing I saw when I woke up. And then the food diagrams that I've re-represented that with theory. So it doesn't make quite as much sense when you look at it through the Ouspensky diagram. And 2003, when I put it beside my bed, I had already been a student of these teachings for 22 years. I even add to it. I think I added a different shade of understanding to it. I think the last time I did that was about 2014, 2015. So my understanding of that, it's been developing over years and years and years. And in order to understand these teachings, we don't really need to understand these teachings if we just did the inner work. But to do the inner work and connect it with the teachings, we can understand what we are doing. And we can see the process. We can see the goal. We can see what we are hoping to achieve. And let me just bring this diagram back briefly once. We look at the very right-hand side, objective consciousness. The highest levels of ourselves at this level is at hydrogen 3, which is the, holy reconciling, the law of 3. Our goal is to become conduits, to become links between heaven and earth. I like to say, and let me see if I can just briefly, I like to say that where I'm circling, these 3 levels, which here again, holy affirming, holy reconciling, holy denying, are the levels of the Godhead. They are the holy levels, the holy forces. And when we're personally conscious, we have one connection to the holy reconciling, to hydrogen 3. We've got a few more connections to hydrogen 6. When we move to the awakened state, we have those 3 points at the holy denying and, more again at that other level, hydrogen 6. So to understand that as we grow our being to those higher levels, we connect with the creative energies of the universe. J.G. Bennett called hydrogen 6 the creative energy of the universe. Hydrogen 3 is the, it's bound by 3 laws. And hydrogen 1 is above us. We can have a lower connection to it, but it's beyond where we are. But we can connect with hydrogen 3, hydrogen 6. We can be a link because our bodies contain minerals, metals. Everything in the earth is found within our bodies, all of those levels. So as we grow our being at the higher levels, it's not like we're leaving our body behind. It's like we're creating this connection to these highest levels of reality. And as we do that, we become of highest service to this planet, bringing it back to helping with the planet, to working with the planet, to helping our fellow human beings. Humanity is out of balance right now. It's out of balance because there are not enough people transforming the higher energies and growing their being at the higher level. And so the attempt to recycle and all of that is great. It helps the environment, but the problem is not going to be solved at that level. The problem will be solved through the growth of our being. And according to Mr. Gurdjieff, when there were 2 billion people on the planet, he said 200 conscious beings. And this is the phrase, if they wished. And to me, it's like, why wouldn't they wish this? If they wished, can change life on planet Earth, can change humanity. We now have 8 billion people. I don't know if this means we need 800 people or 1,000 or 2,000. But if we can develop that, if we can become conscious, and if we so choose, we can focus on this planet, we can begin to bring humanity back into alignment, which will then bring the planet back into alignment, and various things will arise from there. We're almost out of questions, out of time. Any questions of anything anyone wants me to explore perhaps for next week, to go into a bit of detail?
I have a question. This is Ian.
Okay.
You posted recently a quote from In Search of the Miraculous, and I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but I'm still have questions about it. So he says, Mr. Gurdjieff is asking the students if they've noticed anything from their self-remembering And then his sort of end point is that they've not noticed the most important thing, that they don't remember themselves, that with them feels, it senses, I, there's no I there. And that I'm very interested in that distinction between those two, and what he means by that.
Okay. That's a good question, Ian, and I'll take it up next week.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. For those following along on Facebook, I would also like to thank you for joining us. And for those who will be watching this ultimately on YouTube, I think I'm like 3 or 4 episodes behind. I've got to, do a bunch of fiddling with the meetings and then upload it. But I'll, for those of you who do eventually watch this on YouTube, I'd like to thank you for watching. Try to remain as aware as you can as possible. Try to really think about breathing, trying to think about how you can acquire these higher carbons. Go back to In Search of the Miraculous in light of what I've talked about today. Read chapter 9. Try and see if anything jumps out at you. There's so much information in there. It used to be the chapter that I was most nervous about. It's now my favorite chapter in the book, but that's after 38 years of being in these teachings. So thank all of you for being here, and we'll meet again next week. And Hisham, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, we'll connect this week sometime. And I'll have to figure out how you did that. Okay, everyone take care. Bye now.
Thank you, Allan.
Bye.
Thank you.